Katie, have you ever looked into like your genealogy, your background?
A little bit. I think that, my mom looked into, that ancestry.com. I haven't looked into it that deeply, but I do know a little bit about my genealogy. Growing up, I think everybody in my area thought that they were part Native American just because of where we lived, but I'm 100% convinced that we're not.
Now I need to know
Um,
like where you grew up.
well, I grew up in the South Shore of Massachusetts.
See, that doesn't say Native American to me, but okay. I hear
I
you.
mean, as a kid, you don't really question these things. You're just like, oh, okay, I have to do, a stick figure project on the Native Americans. Oh, and we're part Iroquois. All right, whatever. But I don't think that that's true at all. What about you, Kerry? Have you ever researched?
So my family had one of those people who like loves genealogy and went for really far back, I guess. And we're like Irish, 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 Irish with one little tiny branch of French that is evidently illegitimate, like, illegitimate royal tie or something. And so this was like a pearl clutching aunt who was like, oh, oh. So
Do you say it
she
was
like,
royal tie?
yeah, but illegitimate, obviously. And
Of
so she
course.
was like, ah. So yeah, so she like never talked about it. Wouldn't tell anybody, wouldn't show anybody the documents and all this stuff. So I don't know. I'm a royal bastard, maybe. I don't
Well, you
know.
know what, Kerry? I think that means that it's time to punch out. So on today's episode of Punch Out with Katie and Kerry, we are talking with Tamar Weinberg. We will talk about that pronunciation. Tamar is a professional hustler, a best-selling author. One of her books is The Adoptee's Guide to DNA Testing, and she is an all-around OG in the social media world and a perfume maven. Welcome, Tamar. Thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so fun.
So we don't talk about work like at all on the show, but we talked about genealogy just generally. You are so good at it, you can actually drill down into genetic genealogy. So what even is that?
So first of all, I want to share a little bit about my history, about where that came from, because it's actually interesting, and it comes from the OG space, believe it or not. I've always had an interest in genealogy. I've always kind of been interested in the family tree. Didn't like pre-digital times, I had no particular interest in anything where it comes to this, because it's too much effort. I had a cousin who basically, he was 13 when I was born, and he like started going through records. And when records obviously in the 1700s are handwritten in languages you can't even read the handwriting, sometimes you have to like get people, you have to hire people to do translations, all that stuff. Very fascinating. Right. No patience for that whatsoever.
Even if it's English, it's like, what?
Yeah, exactly. I'm sitting here, I actually posted last night on one of these genealogy groups. I'm like, can you tell me what this says on the census record? Actually, a passenger manifest, because I had a cousin who, my great 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 grandparents went to like somewhere in Baltimore, and I can't read that. It's so illegible. I blew it up for everybody. I gave them the whole entire page, because sometimes like the way that somebody writes, you can try to kind of decipher it. Couldn't figure. Nobody knows. Nobody has a clue. That's sort of the nature of the beast. But wow. So, yeah, and going into the digital world, the records have been more digitized in whatever way possible. 2014, I went to South by Southwest, and there was a party hosted by Ancestry. Christy Wells was actually handling that at the time. She was in the social media side, and I attended the party because I thought it was interesting. And I've always wanted to take a DNA test, and at that point, it was a little more cost prohibitive than today. It's a lot more, obviously it's a little more widespread, and it's a little more accessible. And I went and I took a test, and I found the results. And of course I knew my ancestry for the most part. It's like European Jewish, pretty much through and through. And I said, okay, thanks, you validated that. I've forgotten about it. But the thing for me, where the genetic genealogy comes in, is that you get DNA relatives, and that's where like the golden part comes from. When I first looked at it, I'm like, I have no idea who these people are. Sign off. And then like a year later, not so much a year later, but a few months later, somebody reached out to me, and she said, you're my closest match, but so is this other cousin who I knew. And that, to me, triangulates the data, because you can analyze the DNA. The fact that there's somebody who I knew, it usually never happens. They're like, this is the closest match. I have no idea who that is, but he's in your family tree. And I said, oh, this is interesting. And I gave her my entire history. Like, I was raised Jewish. My family is like, really like, we define ourselves as like the Orthodox Jews of the community. Like, and I'm like, to me, this like is completely outside the scope of what I would have come from, and like she didn't even know her history. And fast forward, we started like kind of analyzing additional data, and fast forward a little over a year, and it turns out that my great grandfather has a brother who had a son who was in World War II, who was convalescing in a hospital one day, and he apparently had a relationship, one night stand with a woman who gave up her mother for adoption.
As one does.
Of course. And the history is, I mean, it was fascinating, but she's in her, I think she's still living. She's in her 90s, and
the hot nurse.
What?
The hot nurse is in her 90s.
Hot nurse, I don't know, hopefully. I'm not sure what she's now. She's, you know, like this, very, very hunched over. I don't even know. She's in complete denial. The hot nurse is in complete denial, and I have to
but DNA.
Yep. So what it is, the proof is there, but she didn't take the test. We just were able to kind of figure it out. And so eventually my relationship was actually through the father's side. So but the mother was in denial. And eventually I had, her DNA, she was able to ascertain the mother's side through DNA very easily. I had to help her on the father's side. And I ended up reaching out. I'm like, I don't know anybody. I didn't know my great grandfather had this, you know, my great grandfather had this brother, and it's like a descendant, whatever it was. To make a long story short, I ended up reaching out to a third cousin, and I'm like, oh, I know this family. She's like, oh, I had such a soft spot for this family too. And like, I didn't know that my father had this relationship. And she was like, I'm not really sure. I'm like, go take a DNA test. And she comes up as a half sister to this woman.
Wow.
And she got this closure, and unfortunately she passed away. Like, she had cancer, and she passed away shortly thereafter. So her mother, who's apparently still living, at least she was the last time I checked, like, outlived her daughter. And yet she's taking the secret of having this child to her grave. It's very sad. But
that is sad.
Yeah. But I basically started riding that wave. I found a lot more family. I found some other cousins who were birthed by fathers that they thought that they were raised by fathers that they thought were their actual genetic fathers, and found out that they weren't. And I've solved
it's like some Game of Thrones stuff, Tamar.
It's cool. It's fun. So I'm telling you, you get hooked on this. And it's like, I like the challenges. I don't know. It's weird to say. I'm a Windows PC. I build my own computers. I like to be challenged and to go through these mind games, because Windows kind of can be a mind game. And that's, to me, genetic genealogy is sort of the same thing. It's really like looking at numbers and like trying to figure out who overlaps with who. That's the whole triangulation thing. So yeah, I wrote a book on it, and it did pretty well for itself. I'm like, you know, I'm still dealing with DNA questions all the time, and yet I'm doing something completely different these days. So it's just
Katie, you looking to find more relatives?
Well, you know, it's funny. It's a fascinating topic. And my dad, actually, I remember when I was little, he drew like on the napkin what our family tree looked like, because his father was one of 11 children and his mother was one of, I think, 8 children. They were both Italian, Irish. And those at the time, families tend to be a lot bigger. And now I know I have over in my filing cabinet like a stack of papers, huge, that my dad has done research, but it's all by hand. Like, he hasn't done anything digital on the family, but he managed to get 2 or 3 generations back. But my maiden name, being Leoy, is very almost non-existent in the United States, but in Italy, apparently it's very common, but it's spelled a little bit differently. There's no Y, there's an I. And it's like, I think at some point in my life, I would be interested to do that kind of research to find out if there's more of us, because in the United States, there's only 4 of us, my parents, me, and my brother.
Wow. Yeah. You know, you end up, the thing about Ancestry is that, you know, going into the actual records and the data, you can start doing a search for like a first name and a last name and the exact location of where they might be. And you can eventually trace back to something that can be some historically significant. So Kerry, you might be able to go back to, like, you got your whole bastard, whatever family side there. For me, like, I can't do that. Jewish genealogy, unfortunately, you know, in the Holocaust and all those things, right, all the records were burnt. So like, I can go as far back as like the 1740 on like maybe 1 or 2 great grandparents, great whatever grandparents. And then like, I don't know anything about like my great grandmother's family. In fact, I'm not even sure her maiden name is correct based on the data that I have and the data that I can't find. And there's some DNA matches that I can never figure out. Like they're significant, but they're not significant enough because we can't find the common surname in our family trees. And it's
Your
very
family got frisky, I guess, is what it amounts to.
yeah, everywhere.
Well, it's not uncommon that we have problems with older records that were destroyed by fire and just irreplaceable, and they're just gone. Like that happened in Ireland. Like the church would burn down, and all the baptismal records are just gone.
Right.
And
Yeah,
so you have these big holes. It must be frustrating.
It is, but you would think that there's still like records somewhere else. And the interesting thing is in Europe, any Jewish record was treated completely separate. I guess it's sort of the same thing, completely separate. Like the tax records, the census records, the birth records, the marriage records. It was like we were like alien and
like just for Jewish people. It's like, here's the tax records and there's the Jewish ones.
Exactly.
Like
yes.
Wow.
And it's extremely sad when you look and the other thing that would potentially, derive like help for knowledge, acquisition is tombstones, reading the tombstones. A lot of the tombstones, the cemeteries were destroyed and the tombstones were actually taken to like pave cobblestone on the streets and you can see broken tombstones. It's a really, really sad situation. So I mean, I understand. I have a pretty strong sense of identity, but at the same time, like they're brick walls that like I can't figure out, which is why genetic genealogy is so powerful. Yet, how far can you go if you really can't go that far when like you eventually just end up hitting that brick wall anyway?
When you talk about brick walls, do you ever run into, instances where people just don't want to be found and they don't want to participate, even though a lot of the information about them is public record?
Like
Yeah, absolutely. I have some cousins. I have some cousins who like don't want to be on the family tree at all. It's like they're in complete denial that there's like a digital record, like they won't be on social media. And then I also have cousins who have some understanding of this and yet don't want to be found from specific branches that are deemed too distant to matter. So it's really interesting. I had a cousin who was very receptive to some of the research that I sent out to her. And then I followed up with her and I said, listen, can we collaborate? And disappeared for 2 years. And I checked in with her. Oh yeah, I don't want to talk to you anymore. I'm like, where did this, it's like, yeah. And it's funny because one of her closer cousins is like the DNA connection to like, obviously there's validation there too. So like there's records and there's the DNA. It's like you need both things these days. You need the genealogically significant stuff and the genetically significant stuff.
So there's a lot here. Like we could sit here and talk about this the whole time, but you have other hobbies and things that you do. So.
Yeah.
All I'm thinking is imagine if this technology was around when Jerry Springer first started his show. It would have been very different.
Or Maury. You are the father.
There actually is a guy. His name is AJ Jacobs. And he was actually profiled in People magazine a lot, like maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And his whole idea was to kind of establish how everybody's related in the world.
Oh man!
And so he used geni.com, GENI.com to kind of figure out all those connections.
There's some rude awakenings happening in there, I bet.
Yeah.
Like,
yikes.
It's fun. You like find out how you like related to like Donald Trump, like my fourth cousin, 16 times removed, fathers.
I feel like in that case, ignorance is bliss.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, sometimes ignorance is bliss, but it's really interesting because like everybody is effectively connected in some way through something, and this is what this guy was doing.
You just want to be like, you're not affiliated with me, and have the, like
put that up there.
Yeah, you like not have documentary proof that you are.
I mean, I'll play 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, but I won't play that game.
6 Degrees of Donald Trump. No.
Nope.
Let's talk about Perfume. It feels less fraught.
Yeah. All right. Wrong name, but.
But so let's talk about Perfume, Tamar, because I know that it's not for you. It's not just like, I think I'll create a scent. It was this really powerful personal experience where you kind of discovered the effect that scents can have on you and your sense of well-being.
Yeah. So, I mean, my whole story is like, even while I was really getting into genetic genealogy, I was suffering through a depression that had literally lasted for 8 years. And that in the 7th into the 8th year, I hit a rock bottom. And I was literally that at that point in time, I was waking up, going through the motions, hiding in my bedroom, working, and would kind of show up for my kids for whatever it was worth. And eventually, I realized that I couldn't live like this anymore. One day I decided to do something that was a little deviating from like my norm, which was technically to kind of wear socks, Crocs, and like yoga, like oversized sweatshirts. It was the summer, so it wasn't an oversized sweatshirt, it was an oversized shirt. I found a little vial of perfume. I just decided to open my, a cabinet, and I found the tiny little vial, about 2 mLs, and I put it on, and it changed my life. I don't know what it was. I think because I wasn't invested. I didn't care what I was looking like. I didn't care what I was smelling like. So for me, I wasn't putting it on like most of the world does, because they want the external approval. They want to be, oh, you smell great. What are you wearing? Nobody even does that because nobody wants to ask. Sometimes I do these days, but but a lot of people want to hear it. And for me, I didn't care. I couldn't feel good about myself. I don't care what other people think about me. Or rather, I did so much that I hated myself so much. And that changed everything. I felt like all of a sudden that experience of scent, because I guess it was more of a selfish motive, I decided I wanted to start living again. So the first thing I did was start to buy a bunch of scents. And I was like excited. Every single one was like exciting to me. It was a new experience every single day. And then I started going to Sephora, and I would literally start spritzing my wrists all the way up to like my shoulder, and like experiencing these scents. And people probably smell me and they're like, what the hell? What is she wearing? Like, what is going on? This person smells like, I don't know, not a mall. Like, I don't even know how you would describe that.
Smell like a Sephora?
Yes. Well, yeah, but yeah, that's true. I mean, I wasn't
walking into a Yankee Candle, very overwhelming.
like all the Yankee Candles running at once. Yeah. So, but I got excited each time. Like my experience was different and exciting, and I was like, this is an experience that we don't really. It was experiential, and our experience is really, when we think about it, our lives are 5 senses, and yet when it comes to the sense of smell, we don't do anything. If I asked you, what did you eat yesterday? What did you wear yesterday? What did you watch yesterday? What did you listen to yesterday? You could probably answer all those questions. If I asked you, what did you smell yesterday? You would look at me like I have 3 heads. That's the thing. The problem is that people don't experience, they don't really take we take our sense of smell for granted. We don't take it as like this healing experience, and it's cathartic. It's mindful. It's actually a mindful exercise. I put on perfume in the morning these days with intention, and then I revisit that throughout the day. I want to normalize wrist sniffing these days. So I go, and then all of a sudden, like it anchors me back to the present, and it's literally like a split-second thing. Whereas you sit there, some people try to do mindfulness and they're like on Calm or on Headspace, and they're like, what just happened to me? 10 minutes later, like, what just happened to me? I don't think I got anything out of it. Well, this could do that. So like I'm actually, it's funny. I don't know if perfumes are my competition. I feel like mindfulness products are my competition. But so I got so excited about it, and I decided that I was going to launch a perfume. Like I wanted to do something in perfume, and it took me a few months to figure out what that would be. And I decided, even though it's incredibly saturated, like I said, but again, I don't know who my competition is. I decided in early 2019 that I was going to launch a brand called Tamar.com, and that I would have 2 fragrances initially, because I couldn't do one. With the objective of technically getting people to kind of think about perfume as just the way I described it, happiness in a bottle. Take it, revisit that intention throughout the day, and use something that lasts long enough so that when you're winding down for the day, that it'll still smell and you can still be brought back to that moment, that present moment, that presence. And yeah, I mean, it took about 14 months to, it's still sort of in process. It took me about 14 months to perfect one of the fragrances, and I'm still sort of like finalizing the finishing touches of the second one. And I did a soft launch of the perfume in May on a crowdfunding campaign, ifundwomen.com, and things did very well. I ended up hitting my goal, and now it's all about distribution and fulfillment and all those fun things. So yeah, that brings me to the present, I guess.
Can we talk a little bit about the scents themselves? So when you talk about, people can recall what they ate and what they watched and what they did. It's interesting that you talk about that because I do focus a lot on smell. Like I feel like smell, has a very powerful calming sense. Also, it does heighten anxiety. Like it plays a very big part in your mental health. And, on the days when my husband is home, the first thing I wake up to is the smell of coffee. And for me, that's a comforting smell because it has a certain meaning attached to it.
Right.
If we're sitting outside and I can smell the dryer going, it's like that comfort of clean laundry. So what are some of the scents? Like, can you describe them? Like they smell like, when people say sandalwood, I have no idea what sandalwood smells like. So can you describe these scents?
You mean like mown grass or like lilac?
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
So I will say that the 2 scents that I created were based on just the experiences of smelling a bunch of things. Like literally every single day I would put on something new and I'd be like, I like this. I never heard of patchouli before. I like patchouli. And that was like sort of, it governed one of the scents that I had. And then when I was younger, I always liked, especially growing up in Florida, I always liked coming to New York and smelling like the smoke in a chimney.
Mm-hmm.
Chimney smoke was amazing to me, and it's something that I never really had the experience of going up.
That's interesting because I've been to New York in the summer and I don't remember being like, this smells great.
You're not going to smell it in the summer. You're going to smell it in the winter. Yeah, yes, you're right. So,
but that's like a very distinct smell for like Downtown Crossing in Boston. It kind of smells a little bit like popcorn.
Yeah, and peanuts, like
yeah, and peanuts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's like, oh, whenever you smell it, you're like Downtown Crossing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'm not making a popcorn scented perfume, although that would be kind of neat. There are gourmands out there.
Are you kidding? I love popcorn. I'd be so
yeah. I don't know if you want to smell like popcorn. I don't really know.
Did you know that if you smell burnt popcorn and there's not a round, you might be having a seizure?
Wow, that's depressing. I'm thinking regular, not burnt popcorn. Maybe I'll get a marriage proposal. I don't know. I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah. So the 2 scents that I have are pear and patchouli because I thought patchouli, I don't want to do like one note scents. I want to create something that has like a layered experience. So you put it on, you have, perfume in general has 3 types of like part of its life cycle is like 3 different notes. There's the top notes, the middle notes, and the bottom notes. The top notes last for about 5-10 minutes and then they dissolve. The middle notes last for pretty much the duration of the fragrance. And then the base notes, the bottom notes are like the last maybe hour or 2, depending on how long your perfume lasts. And, I try to give it kind of like a personality, like you'll get more pear in a certain part of it. So, yeah, for me, I would like to think I can't, it's very difficult to describe patchouli. I would never know except
Grateful Dead. It smells like the Grateful Dead.
I was going to say, I've always understood patchouli to smell like hippies.
Yeah.
Okay. My exposure to hippies has been
minimal.
Online on genealogy and researching the gypsies of some of the family trees.
You're lucky.
Yeah.
How do you recommend people then like properly apply and use scents? Because definitely some people overdo it. Mm-hmm. I thought if you could still smell it easily after a couple hours, then you've kind of overdone it.
Yeah. Okay. So first I want to talk about, so pear and patchouli, and the second one is smoke and vanilla. And basically I say one of them is very like more wintry, getting that smokiness, and the other one is more springy. Okay. But yeah, it's really difficult. It's very, very I have a couple of written descriptors that kind of talk about it, like walking out into a very nice field and blah, blah, blah. It's very like, you just all of a sudden like feel like there's like flowers. No, I don't know this vision. It don't work.
It's like a meditation.
Yeah, I don't know. Like it. And then the other one is like in a dark room with a little bit of fire crackling in the corner. Yeah. In terms of application, you don't want to overdo it, but I think I like to say that if you have something that you just put on one little spritz and it lasts, that's just, there are perfumes that have staying power that just are not, like they're not, the perfumes themselves don't have staying power. It makes it a little difficult. It also depends on the alcohol concentration. For me personally, I have like a whole entire, like here's how you should apply the perfume. You should do it with intentionality, and you should also do it technically with this whole component of like just putting on like a one spritz here, one spritz there, one spritz there, and that should be enough for the day. And you should be able to
So like your wrists and your like your pulse points.
Yeah, right. I forgot, you can't really.
Well, so when I was a teenager, I think I read like a Glamour magazine article about proper application. It was like every pulse point, but I mean, this thing had me dousing like head to toe in Love's Baby Soft. So I'm pretty sure it was wrong.
Yeah. I would say make it very simple. Keep it very, very light. That's actually part of the challenge that I had when I said, I've been ideating and kind of finishing up the perfume here. The alcohol concentration makes all the difference. If you have a higher concentration, you are technically going to overpower the entire freaking planet. And I've tested this. I've done some market research on my smoke and vanilla. Was actually difficult to figure out the right alcohol concentration. So I just diluted it at like 17%. It was a little too strong. At 15%, it was still too strong. And if I went down to 14, it was starting to get the right amount. So there's the creation of the fragrance that kind of requires a little bit of mindfulness as well, as in terms of making sure it's not overpowering, but it's also about your personal application. Don't spray it all over the place, and don't do that. What you just said.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. Thanks, Glamour.
Not all the points. Keep it basic. And for me, it's really, my neck is more for other people, but this whole thing for me is this is an exercise in self-acceptance. So literally all I want is to put it on my wrist. These days I wear my mask like around my wrist before, if I don't wear it on my face. So like I'm illustrating this right now. So I was wearing it like this yesterday. I saw my parents, my father, this is actually a little bit of a sad tangent here, but my uncle passed away last Friday, and my father was up literally to sit Shiva for like a hot minute. He was here, and I gave my parents the one of these Tamar masks. I have Tamar masks here, and my mother, he flew down. I saw, like I said, he was literally here for a hot minute. I saw him for a few hours. We drove him to the airport. He came home. My mother texted me later that night, last night, and she says, "Oh, it smells so wonderful. Was it intentional?" And I'm like, no, but like, that's the whole idea. I want you to have that experience, and I wanted you to be able to get that, and just keep it simple on your wrist, and just one spritz should be fine, at least with my stuff. Don't do it too much. The other stuff, it depends on their alcohol concentration. So yeah.
And for those of you listening, when she's talking about alcohol concentration, she doesn't mean waking up after a night of boozing on vodka and having alcohol seep out your pores. That's a different kind of alcohol concentration.
And you should talk to someone about that. Someone professional.
Yeah. And you can, and I will say the alcohol, I don't have anything against putting on the perfume before you go to bed and waking up and feeling it in the morning. So you could do that, just don't booze on it. Yeah.
Do you find that people's body chemistry changes the way that the perfume smells?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely, I think it's everything. Scent is so subjective. So like when I first started telling the story about how fragrance saved my life, people had asked me, well, what's the scent? Like, doesn't matter, because I feel like, Kerry, you might have even asked me that one. But like, it doesn't matter, because everybody has the experience of both from the perspective of smelling somebody else, but also smelling it on yourself, and the fact that you wearing it and somebody next to you wearing it, it's completely different, because our chemistry is so different. There's a whole entire study on there's some sort of chemical, like whatever it is, there's something within our
pheromones or something.
Yeah, something like that. But and there's some research that was done. There's a book called The Scent of Desire by Rachel Hertz. And she talks about how there are actual people, I think they study like the Amish community, and how they have a certain type of like biological, like, you could smell, like, I assume.
You smell Amish?
Yeah, you don't smell Amish, but within
like,
Amish culture, like,
you smell Amish. Yeah,
you smell Amish. They did a longitudinal study, and I think they determined that people are like attracts like, and people who have a certain type of smell like are attracted to each other in that sense, and it's just completely the opposite. I mean, I don't know about you, but like, there are people that have a smell, and then there's other people that don't have a smell. Now, I'm talking about natural body.
I mean, it depends, right? There's people I'll never know, because I'm not getting in there. Like,
well, but that makes sense, because my husband and I both smell like our dogs, and we think that we're great. So
Yeah. But like, there are people like I went to a doctor's appointment and I was actually shopping around for a doctor, and this one doctor had this like scent, and I'm just like, nope, not going to be my doctor. Like you could tell, you could have that as like attraction.
Wow.
It's that gut
Revulsion.
feeling, yeah.
So they-
Oh man, it was really, really, really interesting. Yeah.
Well, I feel like we could talk about this all day, and unfortunately, we're starting to run a little bit out of time. So, I want to thank you. See if there's any final thoughts that you have on, your perfume side hustle, but also where can people find out about you online if they're looking to get more information about what you're working on?
So Tamar.com is right now the website for the perfumes. It's really the story there. I talk about things in lots of different places. So tamarweinberg.com is like my resume. You can learn about me, you can figure out how to contact me there. I'm Tamar on Twitter, Tamar on Instagram, Tamar Weinberg on Facebook. So fb.me/Tamar Weinberg.
because you were there so early, so you just got all the things.
Well, I'm trying
right.
to get more. Instagram I have the trademark for Tamar. That kind of helped a little bit. But people every day try to hack that account. I will tell you, I get password reset emails. OMG, people ask me. I have like these little kids saying, "My name's Tamar too. Can I have it?"
No.
Say, yeah, sure. Tomorrow.
No.
Yeah.
If you buy a whole case of perfume. No, I'm just kidding.
That's right.
Then you can
Unless
buy
you are
it.
at least a third cousin, you can't have it.
You'll smell so good. And thanks. This has been fun. And I feel like we're all going to smell a lot more consciously after this.
Yes, please do. Oh, and the last place I could suggest if you want to read some fun things about like my story, even like coronavirus. I was literally in the first community in the United States that had an outbreak. Our schools were shut down. We were the first school in the United States to shut down. So I wrote about that Medium at Tamar there as well.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us. Happy to see that you've recovered from that, by the way.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Really, really fun.
Thank you.